Mr. Dark whispers.
The wilderness, often seen as a place of beauty and solitude, can also harbor unexplained phenomena and terrifying encounters. From unsettling sounds to elusive creatures and personal hauntings, these accounts delve into the chilling experiences of individuals confronted by the unknown. An anonymous narrator, haunted since childhood, shares why they avoid forests and dimly lit areas after sunset. Growing up in a densely wooded area of the Deep South, their small neighborhood of about 15 houses was surrounded by miles of huge, tightly packed trees. As a child, they loved playing outside at night, but that changed after one particular summer evening. On a cool July afternoon, as the sun began to set, the narrator and their best friend, Danny, sat atop the steepest street in their neighborhood. They were waiting for workers to leave a construction site at the end of a dirt road, about 150 yards from the main road. The two kids planned to collect scrap wood and nails for a new fort, assuming no one would miss the discarded materials. They had waited for almost an hour, seeing no one leave. Impatient, the narrator decided the workers must have left earlier. It was nearly dark, and they set off down the dirt road, relying on a dim flashlight that only intensified the shadows. After about 5 minutes, they reached a clearing where 2 new homes were being built. One house almost finished, had a light on, and a truck was parked beside it. They stopped listening for sounds, but heard nothing. Without thinking, they crept up to the house's open, doorless entryway. The narrator peered inside, seeing no one. They concluded the worker must have left the truck and gone home with someone else, urging Danny to hurry before their moms got angry. They quickly began searching a pile of discarded wood for large pieces. After gathering a small, manageable load, they went back inside the house to look for leftover nails. The narrator found a large metal Folgers coffee can filled with loose nails and screws. They grabbed a handful, stuffing them into the front pocket of their shirt. As they turned to leave, Danny fell in what appeared to be spilled paint. The narrator laughed, helped him up, and then they heard it. Slow, deliberate footsteps outside, seemingly from someone who knew they were inside and was purposefully walking around the back of the house. They panicked, dashing out the front, abandoning their wood, and running towards the dirt road and the safety of their neighborhood. But the sound of footsteps was now to their right, just far enough into the trees for the narrator to see a strange shadow. As they ran, the shadow moved to their left, closer, revealing it wasn't a person. It was too tall, with ears that stuck up and back to a point. The narrator swore it was a werewolf. A long snout, faintly glowing dull green eyes, and a massive hulking form much taller than their 6'3" dad, even when bent over. As they neared the end of the road, the creature was suddenly behind them, impossibly close. The narrator remembered the nails in their pocket, pulling out a handful and dropping them behind them. They heard a yelping, snarling, pained sound, followed by what they hoped was the creature falling. Danny and the narrator burst through the tree line, breathing heavily, running up the street to the safety of the streetlights. They looked back at the trees. The creature stood just outside the tree line, clearly visible now. The narrator experienced raw fear, certain it was about to give chase, knowing it was much faster and stronger. But it didn't. It took a step back, and the trees, or perhaps the darkness itself, swallowed it. Relieved, nearly in tears, they ran to the narrator's front door, locking the window as their mom called out, asking where they'd been. They told their parents nothing, knowing they wouldn't believe a story about a werewolf. They didn't sleep that night, too scared it would come out of the woods. As dawn broke, the narrator gained courage to look outside. The sun revealed huge paw prints in the soft earth beneath their window. The beast had been there, at their window. Inside, they overheard their parents whispering. Their dad's friend, a cop, had found a man's body that morning, after his wife reported him missing from work. His truck was there, blood was in the house. Danny hadn't slipped in paint. It was the man's blood. Not all of the body was found immediately. His legs were at the edge of the trees, his head nearby, but the rest was found in a tree, about 50 yards away. The creature had carried him up the tree to eat him slowly, apparently leaving when it heard the kids snooping. After that, their parents kept them indoors for the rest of the summer. The narrator knew it wasn't a mountain lion or a bear that killed the man and dragged his half-eaten torso 25 feet up a tree. It was a werewolf, and it knew where they lived. It had stood outside their window for God knows how long. The narrator wonders why it didn't kill them. They share this story to comfort others, emphasizing that these creatures are real, just outside, skulking around, waiting for someone to slip up and come a little too close. A 13-year-old in rural Nevada whose family owned 60 acres and 37 cows recounts a terrifying encounter. Regular head counts kept track of the herd. One day, after counting all 37 cows, the father later observed the cows acting frantically on camera, running from the south pasture to the north. A second head count revealed only 36 cows. The narrator went looking for the missing cow in the south pasture, finding it lying on its side, not breathing. Their father and brother joined them, and the father instructed the brother to get the truck to bury the cow. Later, at 2 a.m., the narrator heard a loud noise from the woods. Grabbing a flashlight, they investigated, finding a huge hole where the cow had been buried, and a blood trail leading deep into the woods. Assuming a bear had dug it up, the narrator quietly followed the blood trail. They stumbled upon what appeared to be a deer, but upon closer inspection, it was a terrifyingly tall, furless creature with weird-looking arms eating the cow. They ran back to the house, waking their parents and telling them what happened. Their parents dismissed it as a bad dream. Despite protesting, the narrator was told to go back to bed. Their dreams were filled with visions of the creature. In the morning, the cows were again running, as if being chased. The narrator, assuming the creature was responsible, ran to their parents. By the time they reached the cows, another was missing. They scanned the fence and property, finding a hole large enough for a cow or a similar large creature. Their dad claimed the cow escaped, but the narrator knew what got it. Since then, they fought to have less to do with the cows, afraid the antlered creature might take them instead. At 26, the narrator moved to Las Vegas, ending their scary experiences. Scared Monkey 99 recounts a horseback riding trip to a large ranch in rural northwestern Florida, surrounded by forest. As a believer in the supernatural, they hoped to see something on a 2-hour sunset ride. Arriving in their red Dodge Dakota, they were greeted by ranch dogs and their 2 trail guides. After signing papers, they mounted a large mare named Saffron and set off with a dog trailing them. The first hour was uneventful, trekking through the woods, stopping for water and horse snacks. As it started getting dark, about 1 hour and 15 minutes into the ride, faint noises began. Twigs snapping, leaves crunching, rustling underbrush, normal woods sounds. Soon, all other noises ceased, as if small creatures were afraid. The horses also became spooked, needing constant reassurance. With only a small amount of light left from the sky, they began the 30-minute walk back to the ranch. Everything was still, and the trail guides were spooked. The sound of rustling and branches snapping grew louder, closer. About 20 minutes from the ranch, the narrator looked back to ask the rear trail guide a question and saw something large and dark streaking across the trail where we had been moments before. Their heart jumped. The trail guide saw their expression, turned, saw nothing, and dismissed it as probably just one of the dogs, with a hint of uneasiness. The narrator kept glancing around. Less than 2 minutes later, they turned again, and their face went pale. The trail guide saw their face and looked back, screaming. About 100 feet behind them, a large black figure stood on hind legs in the middle of the trail. It was holding a deer in one of its massive claws. It wasn't a bear. Its claws were wrapped around the deer's neck, and it stood nearly as tall as the 6'5" narrator on horseback. The creature's head was long, with an open maw dripping with blood or saliva. Its arms were unusually long, its knees bent backward like a dog's, and it was covered head to massive paw in sleek, pitch-black fur. The trail guide's screams spooked the horses, sending them into a mad dash for the ranch. Unable to look back, they reached the ranch in record time, quickly dismounted, and ran for the house. Inside, the front trail guide asked what happened. The other trail guide and the narrator decided not to tell the truth, saying they had seen a large bear. The trail guide who saw it walked the narrator to their truck, rifle in hand. The narrator got in and floored it, feeling followed until they reached city limits. They state they won't be returning to that ranch anytime soon. Chris M. recounts an unsettling experience from 2002. When he was 7 or 8 years old, living in Ulagot, Oklahoma, his dad took him fishing at Blue Creek, on an off-the-beaten-path hunting trail, connected to Ulaga Lake. Chris fished alone at a small stone bridge near the entrance, while his dad went further up the creek. was happily catching perch and one small catfish. As the sun started setting, things got unsettling. He heard what sounded like a mixture of whine and laughter. In the distance, dismissing it as other hunters or fishers. A few minutes later, he heard it again, closer, and sounding exactly the same. He wasn't scared yet, attributing it to his youth. Then he heard it a third time, even closer, with the exact same tone as before, like it was a recording. At this point, he was spooked and looked around. He heard it once more, along with a rustling in nearby brush. He panicked, ran to his dad up the creek bank, told him what happened, and they left soon after, never returning. He initially dismissed it as a strange animal. Years later, listening to stories online, some reminded him of that day. He asked his dad about it. His dad confirmed he had heard it too, but only for a little while, hoping it was an animal. Hadn't mentioned it to Chris to avoid scaring him. Chris now believes whatever it was probably saw me as an easier target. He has no intention of returning to that place, believing something huge and dangerous lives in our small lake. Seb, 32, living in southern Florida. Grew up fishing in the various lakes in his neighborhood, which ranged from large connected ones to small, isolated canals. He mentions the dangers of fishing in Florida, including alligators, but states that most had been removed from his area. He often got fresh chicken livers for catfish, which could grow up to 3 feet long and 70 pounds. About a month ago, his opinion on these lakes changed. Fishing for an hour in the connected lakes yielded no luck, so he decided to try a small, isolated lake. About 150 feet across and 30 feet wide. It was gradually getting darker around 5 p.m. He cast his line 20 feet out, waiting for it to sink. After 5 minutes, he felt a sharp tug. He set the hook, and a small, foot-long bullhead catfish squirmed in the water. As he reeled the fish to the bank, something I didn't see tugged on my line. With such powerful force that his 100-pound test rod nearly broke, his line snapped, he fell backward, and the catfish and line were gone. He wondered what could have done that, as no catfish in the lake could break his line so easily. He ruled out alligators and snakehead fish invasive, but his line could withstand teeth, and no snakehead could outmuscle 100 pounds of breaking strength. I packed up for the night, deciding to return early the next morning with chicken liver. At 8 a.m. the next morning, he returned to the same lake. Positioning himself away from the bank, he cast his line. Looking left, he saw a dead bullseye snakehead cut in half. He wondered what predator could have done that, and the idea of an alligator re-entered his mind. He approached the fish. It was clearly split in half, innards splayed, with huge teeth marks. He knew an alligator wouldn't leave a fish uneaten. Suddenly, his neighbor, Mr. Tone, approached. "Hey son, I saw that fish last night. It just washed up on the bank," and along came the rest of it a couple seconds later. Sub asked if it was an alligator. Mr. Tom shook his head. "No alligator would have done that. I haven't seen one since they took them all out. Besides, they would have come up and sung themselves after all, and I ain't seen none of that. Must be another type of fish." Seb knew alligators had to sun themselves. Something strange was going on. He continued fishing and then felt another hard tug. He reeled in a smaller blue catfish. As he took the hook out, he glanced at the water and jumped back. About 5 feet from the bank, a large shadow sat there. It wasn't weeds or litter. It was huge, at least 25 feet, and the lake was 40 feet deep. The front of it was oval with a flat head. He could make out fins on the side, bigger and wider than a shark's. He desperately looked for a tail. Then, it slowly seemed to sink. When the shadow was gone, he looked at the catfish, nearly dead. He quickly threw it back, packed his gear, and prepared to leave, vowing never to return to this lake. Then he heard a splash, whipped his head around, and saw a giant head, grayish, clamping the catfish in its jaws, which were full of razor-sharp teeth at least 4 inches long. The head dipped back into the water with the catfish. He was horrified. The head was definitely not a shark or alligators. Researching later, the only similar thing he found was a dunkleosteus, a prehistoric sea creature. He couldn't match the tail or body, and the teeth were different. Not bony like a dunkleosteus, but razor-sharp and in 2 rows. The creature was 20 to 25 feet long, while a dunkleosteus was about 30 feet. Wonders how a prehistoric creature could be in a small freshwater lake, and why no one else has seen it. He fears what it could do to him. Now, when fishing in other lakes, he stays away from the bank and never puts a finger in the water, throwing fish back from a distance. He insists he's not making this up, believing there's something in the smallest lake in my neighborhood lurking beneath the shallows, and I don't think it's a gator or crocodile. Drift recounts a regrettable trip to Elk Island National Park in Alberta, Canada, 2 years ago when they were 17, curious about alleged skinwalkers in the area, a rumor they initially dismissed as drunken teenagers mistaking deer. They let their friends pressure them into a camping trip. They, and a friend named Tom, planned to sneak through a small hole in the park gate, where their older friends would help them get in. The camping spot was about 2.5 miles into dense woods, via a nearly invisible path that curved right, even denser than the main road. A deer ahead sign was the only indication it was a road. Drift found the whole idea sketchy. They were speeding through the bumpy road when the car suddenly broke down right at the side path. This meant walking the rest of the way. One friend tried to use his phone's GPS, but it wouldn't turn on. Drift asked if he knew where they were going, but he whispered to himself about his phone being charged. They all stopped, feeling watched. Suddenly they heard footsteps around them, dry sticks cracking in the silent forest, terrifying them. They couldn't see the source. Then it stopped. All at once, they ran back to the car. Drift could hear something running behind them. They heard Tom's voice, "Help," fading into the woods. A surge of courage came over Drift. They turned back towards where they heard Tom running. For a while, they heard nothing, then rested on a log. Tom's voice called for help again, closer. Drift ran towards the voice, entering a large, moonlit clearing. Tom's voice, now gurgly and distorted, called, "Stop," but Drift saw nothing. They knew it wasn't really Tom. Then right behind them, they heard, "Do you know where we're going?" sounding like Drift's own voice, then deeper and more distorted. Somehow Drift gathered the courage to turn around. They saw a horrific creature on all fours, a normal right arm, but the left arm bent completely the opposite way. The left leg was missing a foot, but the right had a stump with a weird wolf-looking paw. Its glowing yellow eyes stared into Drift's. Then it stood up, towering 2 feet over the 6 feet one Drift. Dark red substance dripped from its jaw as they stared. It opened its mouth and said, "Help," its mouth moving unnaturally, its voice too deep to be Tom's. It said one more thing that still gives Drift goosebumps. "Leave now," carrying a W sound for an entire minute. Drift said nothing, then ran back towards the road. The car was gone. Their friends must have gotten it working. Drift had to walk the most horrific walk of their life. But the sounds of the forest returned crickets. Frogs are frogging comfort. What they saw in that forest remains unexplained, and the terror indescribable. Drift hasn't returned since. They warn that if you go to Elk Island National Park, you've already made a big mistake. It's a possible alien encounter. Mr. Anonymous? Mr. Anonymous recounts a strange incident that happened a couple of weeks ago while camping in his backyard with his girlfriend. Something they'd done numerous times before. Around 2 a.m., after drinking wine and making s'mores by the campfire, they retired to their tent, where he had set up a TV and PS4. His girlfriend fell asleep around 2:30 a.m., and he followed shortly after. He woke around 4:30 a.m. needing the bathroom, just not wanting to wake his girlfriend with the loud tent zipper. He used a bottle. Turning back to sleep, he noticed his girlfriend was gone. Startled and worried, he called her name but got no response. He threw on his shoes, grabbed a flashlight, and ran out of the tent. She had sleepwalked before, though not in their 2.5 years together, so this was odd. He couldn't find her in the pitch-black yard, so he ran to the downstairs sliding glass door, yelling her name. Finally, he heard her voice from upstairs asking if everything was okay. He asked why she'd left him in the tent. She insisted she hadn't, and had no idea how she got inside, let alone on the futon upstairs. He called bullcrap, arguing that sleepwalkers don't zip up tents and close doors. They looked for her phone. She had no memory of even going inside the tent, despite only half a bottle of wine each. They found her shoes, phone, and glasses inside the tent. He states, "I know that's not sleepwalking." He's a light sleeper and would have heard her, especially the rustling of sleeping bags. Yet her side of the sleeping bag was perfectly made, as if she had simply vanished into thin air and reappeared in the house. He also noted that it was the only night they had slept without their dog or cat in the tent, suggesting something might have been a bit more brave. He doesn't know what happened, but asks for thoughts. Jose_4 recounts a camping trip to a rural part of Jamaica when he was 14. He describes himself as 5'3" with a medium build. The drive was about 1.5 hours. Upon arrival, they hiked to find a good spot, coming across a stream where they decided to get dinner. 2 hours later, around 4:30 p.m., they packed up and found a good camping spot. Suddenly, an awful, pungent smell like expired sour cream and rotten eggs mixed in an unclean toilet left in the sun hit them, and it was close. Chills went down his spine, and dread rushed over him as he heard the shrillest, most ear-piercing screech he'd ever heard. He grabbed a sawed-off double-barrel shotgun and ran into the tent, falling asleep despite it only being 6 p.m. At about 2 a.m., he awoke to a branch snapping and had to use the bathroom. As a horror movie enthusiast, he knew not to move. He lay still, shotgun in hand. About 10 minutes later, he heard his uncle scream. He quickly woke his dad, sleeping next to him, and slowly walked out, hoping his uncle was playing a trick. But nothing prepared him for what he saw, a creature at least 8 feet tall, exuding the same smell, with 2 horns, standing on 2 awfully man-like legs. He assumed he was in heck, looking at the devil himself. Within 2 agonizing seconds, he fired at the creature's leg. It jolted back in a way that is human-like, a little too human. It then turned and acknowledged them, as if it wanted to speak, and swore it did. He doesn't remember what it said, but it spoke in a deep, raspy, manly voice with hellish red gleaming eyes that stared through his soul. He fired again, this time into its back, which seemed covered in white, dirty-looking fur. After 5 seconds, the creature ran off into the woods, leaving a blood trail. His uncle was almost in tears, his dad frozen. Jose_4 was surprisingly composed. They stayed in one tent, packing up, planning to book it back to the truck as soon as the sun comes up. After 7 hours, they drove away like a bat out of heck. On the drive home, they said nothing. 2 weeks later, they visited his aunt, uncle, and cousins in the countryside, a 3-hour drive away. They spent the night. The 5-acre woodland area around the house had good LED lighting. After 10 minutes of talking, they went inside to freshen up. Jose_4 went to his room, where 2 cousins, Brian and Mario, were playing Forza Horizon 4. Around 10 p.m., he went to bed without turning on the light. He heard the door open at one point, assuming it was his cousins. About 2 hours later, Mario came in, turned on the light, and screamed. Jose_4 will never forget the look on his face. When he asked what was wrong, Mario looked as if he had accidentally killed someone. The thing that had been in the room with Jose_4 was not his cousin. It was the creature they had seen before. They both watched it walk to the open window, descend, and walk away into the woods as if nothing happened, moving so human-like, so disgusting, so purposefully. Everyone ran upstairs, and after hearing the story, Brian simply said, "Goat man." Fortunately, this was Jose_4's last personal experience with the creature, and he hopes it remains so. Wonders what would have happened if he had turned on the light. Or if Mario hadn't come in when he did. Or if Mario had laid down next to the creature without turning on the light. He's glad he doesn't know. It screamed the Night Runner. The Night Runner recounts a Boy Scout camping trip to Tomahawk, Wisconsin when he was 17. On the 3rd day, returning from the store with a souvenir hatchet, he looked for his friend Thomas, but he was gone. Headed back to camp in the dark, with no light source, cursing his friend for leaving him. After about 5 minutes of walking, he heard a faint, distant, but eerie scream. He wanted to run, but then the scream got louder, closer. He expected to be at camp by then. It scared him out of his skin. Then came a growl right behind him. Without thinking, he looked back and saw something paler than gray, kind of a whitish tint. Its face still gives him night terrors. He heard it crashing through the forest. He made it back to camp after running away, but in his panic, he tripped over a root and bled. His scoutmaster helped him up, and his friend got in trouble. Still doesn't know what the thing was, or how it traveled a few hundred yards in a few seconds. As the scream wasn't that close, then it was growling next to him. Pat recounts a camping trip in his backyard in rural Shreve, Ohio. It's with his best friend B in 2009. His home was on a couple of acres, surrounded by 1,500 acres of farmland. While camping and watching skateboard videos on YouTube, they began to hear coyotes in the woods to their left, a common sound that generally didn't bother them. But then, the coyotes suddenly stopped making noise, which put them on edge. Out of nowhere, they heard a different noise. The sound of a large dog sniffing right outside our tent. They were freaked out as a coyote had never been that close. Then, a large human-like hand lay itself on the tent door, visible to them. They were silent, too afraid to move. Suddenly, something huge began to crawl underneath the tent, growling viciously. Pat's friend grabbed the hammer for tent stakes and started hitting where he felt the head. Instead of a yelp, the creature growled even worse, sounding demonic. After a few more hits, they ran as fast as we could, through the tent door, across an acre yard, and into the garage. Every time Pat glanced back, he saw a massive shadow following close behind, a black silhouette against the dark. Inside the garage, the tale ends. Pat remembers being terribly scared all night and never trusted those woods again. It's not entirely certain it was a skinwalker, but its behavior and human-like hand make him think of it. Werewolf sighting. The Mad Miller. The Mad Miller recounts reports from sheep farmers along the Dutch-German border in the spring of last year. These shepherds in the eastern Dutch provinces and southeast reported multiple cases of their sheep and even sheepdogs being slaughtered but not eaten. News outlets covered these cases, noting unusual behavior if wolves were the killers. Wolves typically eat their prey and don't usually fight sheepdogs or invade human territory, especially when guarded by dogs and electric fences. Still, reports of killed sheep and sheepdogs, sometimes partially eaten, continued.
Ow!
In the southeast, 11 sheep were slaughtered and left untouched, with only deep tooth marks in their throats and one paw print about 7 inches long. A period of silence followed. Then, new reports emerged in the east, claiming wolves were responsible, confirmed by DNA tests from bite marks. Roughly a year later, a small wolf pack lives in the biggest Dutch national park, Valua, and no more sheep killings are reported in the news. The killer of the 11 sheep in the southeast was also attributed to a wolf, but without DNA evidence or further arguments. Other than young wolves looking for territory, this contradicts the idea that wolves avoid guarded human settlements. The situation was quite suspicious. The Mad Miller loves nocturnal hikes in the woods, doing so at least 3 times this year, despite it being illegal after sunset or before dawn. They wear dark clothes to avoid detection. They've been addicted to nocturnal hikes since going off trail in summer 2017, feeling a strong call of the wild, are always energetic and excited, sometimes even feeling the urge to hunt, though they lack a license or weapons. A few weeks ago, at the start of autumn, they went for another night hike. It was cloudy and rainy, so they brought a flashlight. They chained their mountain bike to a pole and walked into the darkness. They saw the last people leaving the woods. In the middle of the forest, they enjoyed the cold scents and sounds, almost forgetting a past encounter there. Sitting on a wooden bench, they heard the faint, distressed bleating of sheep about 200 meters away, as if panicking and fleeing. They were surprised to hear and smell the sheep from so far despite the wind. It's common to find sheep flocks controlling weeds in these woods, held by easily removable electric fences. This night, the flock was on a small moor. It took time to reach the pen, hidden by bushes. What they saw shocked them. Frantic sheep, into slaughtered sheep in a puddle of blood, their throats torn by jaws bigger than a dog's or wolf's. The fence was untouched. They noticed enormous canine paw prints around the corpses and pen, as if the killer meticulously chose its prey before stepping inside. The sight was shocking and terrifying, but strangely not for them. Instead, they felt frustrated about someone or something having been roaming around in my woods, causing a disturbance. Seeing the woods as their second home, they recklessly decided to follow the tracks, acknowledging they were walking into the jaws of death. They followed the huge tracks until the dense trees made it hard to see. They changed their mind, pulling out their flashlight. The sheep were still panicking about 55 meters behind them. Suddenly, a new scent hit them, a mix of wet dog and fresh blood. This was followed by calm footsteps on the forest floor, as if something was approaching. They directed their flashlight towards the sound and scent. First seeing gold-yellow eyes about 4 feet above the ground, bigger than a dog or wolf, they froze as the beast stepped closer, revealing its face and body. It was similar to a wolf, but slightly bigger and sturdier, with dark fur on its back and lighter on its belly, and a short dark mane. It seemed to be staring cautiously, not aggressive yet. The blood on its snout confirmed it killed the sheep. Now they were indeed scared, realizing they stood little chance against such a beast. Still showing no aggression, the creature came within 5 meters. Then it stood up on 2 legs like a bear, towering about 7 feet tall. The narrator's hair stood up, and they took a defensive stance, constantly reminding themselves not to show fear or intrigue. This seemed to work. The wolf-like creature stepped back slightly, breaking eye contact. The narrator took a tiny step forward, trying to look defensive or territorial, appearing to have the upper hand. Then, they did something ballsy. They spoke to it, trying to sound fearsome and demanding, "My woods, get out." To their surprise, it worked. The beast turned its head away, growled softly in what seemed like a protest, then went down on all 4s and disappeared into the darkness. Before it vanished, it gave one last awfully human-looking glance, its eyes reflecting the flashlight beam. As soon as it was gone, the narrator let out a loud sigh of relief. Realizing they had survived a life-or-death encounter with an animal beyond the normal, something that reminded them of a werewolf. Cold shivers and nausea followed, intensified by a piercing, distant howl from behind, both beautiful and haunting. They wanted to get the heck out of those woods. After 20 minutes of speed walking and cautious peering into the darkness, they reached their bike, unlocked it, and raced home. At home, the realization hit again. They could have been as dead as those sheep. They wonder why it didn't attack them and how it reacted to their scent. They also note no news reports about the slaughtered sheep, as if it never happened, and suspects the shepherd denies it. The narrator won't tell their family or friends. They believe if it comes up in the news, people will just think it's a wolf, like other killings in the Netherlands. They are quitting nocturnal walks, believing next time they may not be so lucky. Lights in Coconino National Forest. Atel Hudrat. Adel Hudret and her husband, living in their camper van, visited family in West Texas in October, then went to Arizona for a music festival. After the festival, they explored Tucson and its gem and minerals show before heading to Flagstaff and the Grand Canyon. Along the way, they found an awesome boondocking spot in Coconino National Forest. On a small Forest Service road with only 2 spots, one was occupied by a man and his young son, seemingly spending the day in Sedona. They snagged the last spot, perched on a leveled hill with views of surrounding mountain ranges and a ranch fence. The remote location was perfect for stargazing and privacy. They usually went to bed at sunset and woke at sunrise with a middle-of-the-night bathroom break. During one such break, they were amazed by the stars and decided to stay another night. The next day, they enjoyed music, rock counting, and the landscape. Atal kept noticing a bright strobe-like light on a particular ridge, and her husband looked and it was gone. She initially dismissed it, but after seeing it a few more times, she became concerned as a wilderness first responder, wondering if it was a stranded hiker. However, the light's location changed too often for someone traveling by foot or bike. That evening, after dinner, they sat outside watching the sunset, then went back into the van until it was dark enough for stargazing. Around 10 or 11 p.m., they came out, and Atel immediately looked up, seeing a bright white light that seemed close. She asked if it was the North Star, wondering why it was so bright and close. Her husband was unsure. They walked around looking at the sky and satellites. Going around the van and back to their original spot, they noticed the light was gone. Then they saw it again, moving further away and changing color to yellow, red, and blue, moving rapidly like a hummingbird. Atal, having seen other phenomena like the Marfa lights, wasn't initially worried, but this changed quickly. The light began changing colors into monochromatic ranges of deep violet and violet blues with magenta, almost peaceful. It moved closer, changing colors more often, and came down to ground level on the other side of a large juniper, a short distance from them. Atal lost her breath as they realized it was literally peeking at us from around the juniper, just as they had been peeking at it from their van. It moved like a curious child, and the light seemed to be its face, as tall as an average male. Suddenly, Atal realized how close they were to seeing it fully and became afraid, feeling she wasn't ready to know the answer to a big question. She may have made a noise or jumped back in fear, and the light thing did not like this. It dropped very low to the ground, almost Cadillac, looking through the bushes, and immediately began pulsating red, the color of aggression. Terrified, they ran back to the van, jumping in and locking the doors. Their van had bubble-wrap mylar insulation in the windows for winter, so they couldn't see out. Adel was horrified. After calming down, they decided to look outside again. The spot where the light had been was empty. A relief, but also making her wonder if she imagined it. Then she looked left, beyond the fence to the ranch, noticing several similar lights moving back and forth in greens and blues, far away enough not to worry her. She turned towards the ridge she'd looked at earlier that morning, thinking she saw something larger moving in the dark. She dismissed it as crazy, but then a bright light came on. Not a light, but a creature of some sort, resembling alien beings as robots or were machines. This large, visible machine shone a light into the valley where they'd seen the blue and green lights. It flashed a couple of times, then vanished. All other lights were gone shortly after and didn't return. Attell wishes they had grabbed their phones, but the first part happened too fast. She notes quite a bit of strangeness in photos taken during the trip. She wonders how the object moves silently at 80 miles per hour and what its technology was. She used to expect a government debriefing, but it never happened. She still dreams of driving at night and hearing a woman's voice singing Scarborough Fair, waking when the song finishes. Spider Milk recounts a series of unsettling events that began in summer 2016. Shortly after moving to a spacious suburban house in Texas, she was 16. The mobile game Go was popular. And despite her dislike of hot weather, she ventured into her neighborhood to play. She met another kid, Brandon, at a local park. He was down-to-earth, upbeat and sweet, openly gushing about games. They parted ways but met several more times that summer. On a Saturday, things got weird. Cicadas in Texas are incredibly loud, but Spider Milk usually tuned them out. She hadn't played the game for a few days and was eager to meet Brandon. After walking for over an hour, she found him. They hung out, but the sun was getting low, and she knew her mom wouldn't be happy if she returned after dark. Before she could bring it up, they both stopped, facing the end of a road that opened into a small field. A shrill noise came from the distance. Spider Milk, a logical person, is not superstitious, but Brandon was clearly on edge. The sound was short, but cut through the distant traffic noise. She nudged him, asking if he was good. Hey. He nodded, saying it reminded him of his baby brother Tim. She pressed him, and he reluctantly explained that Tim had bad dreams from kids next door, telling him to creepy rules for their neighborhood, specifically for the old abandoned train tracks next to their cul-de-sac. The rules were: 1. Never whistle after sundown. 2. Don't look behind you. Spider Milk laughed, but Brandon seemed nervous. She reassured him that no whistling monster existed. He seemed to calm down, and she headed home as the sun was setting. Sometime in July, she went to the tracks around noon, determined to find a specific. After half an hour, she walked down a dirt path by the river's edge. She sat, switching between Go and social media, unaware of the time until she saw her phone. Getting up, she took a drink, then got a notification. Brandon had sent her a gift. She didn't open it. She was reminded of the rules and, despite skepticism, was curious. She texted her mom she'd be back after dark, buying herself some time. She then pulled up Snapchat and started recording. "Hey Brandon," she said, "I'm about to myth bust those kids' rules right now." She then whistled a nursery rhyme, "Itsy bitsy spider." Nothing happened. She sarcastically raised an eyebrow, ended the video, and sent it to Brandon, then started walking back. The cicada noise had died down significantly, which she initially attributed to distraction. She wasn't worried. The worst things out there were deer, coyotes, or hobos. Then, a crack came from behind her. She turned, looking to rules down, but saw nothing. She shivered and picked up her pace, the nursery rhyme stuck in her head. She clutched her water canteen. She rounded a bend and saw the neighborhood streetlights. There was another noise. Something dry and hollow, sounding like the howling of wind, but it was a long, strained deco, changing tune subtly in the middle, almost like a whistle. She was scared but didn't run, fearing she'd attract attention. The place felt taboo, like it belonged to someone or something else. Her hands shook, anxiety coiling in her gut. No more sounds, but she saw movement ahead in the tree line. To her left, trees and bushes pushed slightly. She crouched on the train tracks. The sudden movement seemed a bad idea. At first, a shape emerged from the bushes, looking like a bear, shaggy, grayish-brown, perhaps larger. But she knew Texas didn't have many bears. It wasn't a bear. It moved like an ape or a man on all fours. It was hairless, emaciated, pale, with animal hide stretched across its back like armor. Its head was a deer skull, but she could see a grisly, deformed face and bust hiding right underneath. Bony and stretched, with milky white eyes contrasting with the skull's shadow, the only visible feature of its real face. The thing rose up, the grimy pelt dragging, its head twitching as it looked around. By some miracle, it didn't see her. She didn't move, desperate to cry, but stayed put. The creature then fell back onto all fours, skinny limbs splayed like a spider's. It raised its head, its actual jaw moving under the skull. The sound it made was awful, the same soothing, eerie howl from earlier, but with a snarl underneath. This creature was a predator. Still, it showed no aggression. It came within 5 meters. Then, it stood on 2 legs like a bear, towering 7 feet tall. Her hair stood up. She took a defensive stance, reminding herself not to show fear. It leaned forward, sniffed the air, then perked its ears, seemingly more suspicious. She tried to appear big, defensive, and territorial. She did something ballsy. She spoke to it, trying to sound fearsome and demanding. "My woods, get out." To her genuine surprise, it worked. The beast turned its head, growled softly in protest, then went down on all fours and disappeared into the darkness. Before vanishing, it gave her one last awfully human-looking glance, its eyes reflecting her flashlight as soon as it was gone. She let out a loud sigh of relief, then started shivering, realizing she'd survived a life-or-death encounter with an animal beyond the normal, something like a werewolf. Its cold shivers and nausea, and then a piercing but distant howl from behind, both beautiful and haunting. She wanted to get the heck out of those woods. After 20 minutes of speed walking and cautious peering, she reached her bike and raced home. The realization hit her again. She could have been dead. She wonders why it didn't attack her, why it reacted to her scent, and why there was no news about the slaughtered sheep. She suspects the shepherd might deny it. She won't tell her family or friends. She believes if it's in the news, people will think it's a wolf. She's quitting nocturnal walks, fearing she won't be as lucky next time. Bigfoot in Gaston, Oregon. Ryan recounts a quick but creepy encounter from when he was 8 years old, recently in foster care. It was around 8 p.m., and he was at a family friend's house in Gaston, Oregon, which had a hazelnut orchard with 10 to 15-foot tall trees. He and his brother were having a Nerf gun war with the family's 2 boys. Ryan and his brother were by the back of the house when his brother, a bit freaked out, said, "Ryan, look." Ryan followed his gaze and saw a tall figure walking in between the trees. It stood close to the top of the trees, so colossal that Ryan guessed it was about 10 feet tall. Ryan panicked and shouted, "It's Bigfoot." His brother tried to keep his cool and told him to be quiet. The Bigfoot paused for a moment before continuing on its way, likely going into the hills to hunt before returning to the valley. Ryan has been criticized for his sighting, but also had people believe him. He advises anyone in Gaston, Oregon, to be on the lookout for a Bigfoot. Hunts me, Robert 26017. Lives with his sick grandparents in Romania. Last year in October, his grandmother told him the house rules, including feeding animals and helping around the house. One rule stood out: never under any circumstances leave open the back porch at night. He thought it strange, but dismissed it. Days later, farm life grew on him. One night, after chores, he went out to smoke a cigarette. It was pitch black. He went closer to the back porch to hide his smoking. A few minutes later, he smelled sulfur and iron, like decay, growing stronger. He knew something was wrong, but curiosity took over. Suddenly, something crashed into the fence to his right. He turned, and his blood ran cold. A head silhouette with horns over the 7-foot fence, meaning the thing was at least 1.5 feet taller. He ran like a bat out of heck. Back inside, he was pale. His grandmother knew instantly what happened. She sat next to him and explained that that thing had haunted the farm for years, entering only if the porch was open. She revealed it was responsible for his grandfather's death, who was found dead at the farm's edge. Everyone else blamed wolves, but his grandmother said one night His grandfather forgot the porch, and around 11 p.m. she heard him scream. She saw only a tall, skinny figure running away, dragging his grandfather by the head. She never told anyone, fearing they'd think she was crazy. But now Robert has seen it and believes her. He's seen it since, and each time, it shakes him to his very core, though he's getting used to it. 2 weeks later, they visited his aunt, uncle, and cousins 3 hours away. They spent the night. The place had 5 acres of empty woodland with good LED lighting. After 10 minutes of talking, they went inside to freshen up. Robert went to his room, where 2 cousins, Brian and Mario, playing Forza Horizon 4. Around 10 p.m. he went to bed in the dark. He heard the door open but dismissed it as his cousins. About 2 hours later, Mario came in, turned on the light, and screamed. Robert will never forget his look. He seemed to have accidentally killed someone. He was in total awe, because the thing that had been in the room with Robert was not his cousin. They both watched it walk to the open window, descend, and walk away into the woods, as if nothing happened, moving so human-like, so disgusting, so purposefully. Everyone ran upstairs. After hearing the story, Brian simply said, "Goat man." Fortunately, this was Robert's last personal experience with the creature, and he hopes it remains so. Wonders what would have happened if he had turned on the light, or if Mario hadn't come in when he did, or if he had laid down next to the thing without turning on the light. He's glad he doesn't know. The lucky runner recounts a non-normal camping trip in Manitoba, Canada, with her 2 sisters. As the middle sister and the most outgoing, she wasn't foolish. Upon arrival at the small campsite, they found only one family leaving, who warned them not to stay due to strange sounds and noises. Though put off, they stubbornly set up camp. They walked a trail, and the narrator, not afraid of heights, decided to climb a tree to show off. High up, she heard large noises far off, presumably a bear, moose, or other dangerous animal. Her sisters heard it too and nervously called for her to come down. She told them to run back to camp slowly for safety, promising to wait for the animal to pass, then follow. They agreed, her older sister complaining but complying. She descended a little, then sat still. As the noise approached, she saw something that changed her perspective on life. A massive wolf that looked stretched and skeletal on the path, sniffing. Her head pounded as the creature sniffed right up to her tree. She didn't dare move. It looked around, then up, its bright yellow eyes staring. Then it stood on 2 legs like a person. A scream caught in her throat. She tried to climb higher, tearing off branches and chucking them down, hoping to drive it away. She heard a grunt, and it stepped back. Then it spoke, in a voice so similar to my sister's, yet not. "You're an idiot, you better not fall." The words were drawn out, as if trying to get the pronunciation right. This redoubled her terror. She threw more branches. It paced, staring. Then she thought it decided she wasn't worth the effort and walked off into the dim forest. After a few minutes, she descended, looked around, and made a final jump to the mossy forest floor. As soon as she landed, she heard a crack from a tree beside hers. She looked up, and the creature was there, looking down with a predatory gaze. She mouthed, "How?" snapped a branch, preparing to jump. Her brain screamed to run. As a long-distance runner, she bolted down the path, dodging trees and jumping rocks. She could hear its breath as it raced beside her, race for her life. After 10 minutes, she broke from the trees into the campground, covered in scratches. Her sisters were laughing beside the tent, playing a game. She ran to them, screaming for them to jump into the car. They saw the blood in her terrified state and didn't hesitate. They yelled questions inside the car, her older sister in the front, younger waiting for her. But the questions died as they saw what was following her. She'd never seen such fear in their eyes. She jumped in, and her older sister slammed the gas, peeling off down the dirt road. It was getting dark, and her sister expertly wove down the trail in their crappy silver car. She was surprised how calm her sister was. They hit the main road and sped to a gas station. There, her sisters grilled her, and she told them everything, as they always were honest with each other. They seemed to disbelieve the part where it talked in her sister's voice, which clearly disturbed her older sister. They were confused about calling the police. Her younger sister tried to stop the bleeding from her cuts. They were still in the woods, even at the gas station, located off a minor backwoods highway. They decided their tent and sleeping bags weren't worth their lives. Luckily, their cell phones and cameras weren't in the tents yet. Her older sister decided to call the cops to report a dangerous animal. The authorities met them a couple of hours later. They stated they thought it was a bear to avoid appearing crazy. The cops went to collect their things but returned with only shredded fabric. They closed off the campsite, and forest rangers were called but never found a bear. It's been for years. They talk about it with their families but haven't gone back to that campsite. To whatever wolf-like creature thing, she says, "I never want to see you again, nor those menacingly yellow eyes." But they won't stop camping, even if they have to go somewhere else. The Night Watcher. James Y. James Y. recounts an experience from about 20 years ago. When he was just out of high school, visiting his grandparents' farm in southeastern Oklahoma near the Ouachita National Forest. The farm was usually peaceful, a place where troubles melted away, with cousins visiting, country breakfasts, and singing. But until the sun went down, it changed. Growing up, he always felt watched at night on the farm, often having nightmares of something coming from the woods. He'd hear noises on the front porch while sleeping in the living room. Little did he know, something would indeed emerge from the forest. One late day, in his late teens or early 20s, lying on the bed in the back bedroom, he heard an ungodly and otherworldly scream or howl. It was unlike anything he'd ever heard, loud and echoing, close enough to be in the backyard. His mom and everyone else were busy chatting and making supper, the kind of family who would dismiss any strange noise or sighting. Knowing this, he rolled his eyes and decided to investigate. He walked out the back door with only a camera, admitting he was young and stupid, but on a mission to photograph whatever strange creature was making the sound. It was moving away, and he followed it through the backyard into the pasture and deeper into the woods, becoming more perplexed. He realized it could be a mountain lion or panther, and he could be mauled, but still hoped for a picture. He then noticed the sun going down and decided to head home, still hearing the screaming behind him. He made it safely back to the house in the dark. A night or two later, he was staying with his cousin Billy, who lived up the hill. They decided to go for a middle-of-the-night dip in one of his grandfather's ponds, ignoring the danger of water moccasins and copperheads. They did this for 3 or 4 nights. On the 5th night, Billy wanted to sleep, so James went alone, quickly got creeped out and left the pond. Crossing the open pasture, he caught something out of the corner of his eye. Someone else in the pasture, tall and thin, standing on 2 legs. It was too dark to see clearly. He immediately froze, thinking he'd be found dead in the morning. He squatted, hoping the moon would illuminate it. The thing just stood there, motionless, too afraid to move himself. He eventually stood up again, still unable to see it well, but knew he had to leave. He slowly started moving away, then quickened his pace, terrified it was following. He prayed it wouldn't get him. Back at his cousin's house, he ran inside and locked the door. Billy was asleep. James didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next day, he told Billy what he'd seen. They went to the pond, retracing his steps through the pasture, which had no trees or posts he could have mistaken for a creature. What was it that I saw that night? A night or two later, he was back on the back porch at his grandparents', sleeping in a bed with windows above his head and to his right. His cousin Sarah slept in another bed. He was awakened by something tapping or knocking on the window above his head. Fear instantly returned. It was pitch black outside, no lights, no flashlight. How did this thing know my exact location within the house? He wondered. The fear was uncontrollable. He couldn't move or speak, praying it would go away, but it continued to tap. He heard it walk on 2 legs around the side of the house, pacing, then return to the same window and tap again. His heart pounded. He couldn't move or scream. He dared not look out. After what seemed like an eternity, it left. He stayed awake all night, too afraid to sleep. Only when sunlight appeared could he close his eyes, told everyone the next morning, but no one gave it much thought. His cousin Billy came down and they went to the window. James wanted to see how tall it would be to reach. No one really listened except his cousin Roger, 20 years older. Roger said that when he was a kid, he and another cousin were sleeping on the back porch when something tapping on the window woke them, scaring them so badly they still remembered it. This mirrored James's story. What is this thing that's been around the property for at least the past 50 years now? And what does it want? James didn't spend many more nights there. His grandparents soon moved to a nursing home and passed away under strange circumstances. The house was demolished in a fire. He tried to share his story with BFRO, but they didn't publish it or respond, likely finding it too unbelievable. He wonders if it was a Bigfoot, or something like a rake or Wendigo. He insists these instances happened and terrified him. He doesn't care who believes him, only that he experienced it. He believes somewhere deep within those woods in southeastern Oklahoma, it's still there. What I saw in the Siberian tundra. Russian Werewolf 756. Russian Werewolf 756 recounts a week-long visit to his grandfather in the Siberian tundra in June 2019. His grandfather, after divorcing his grandmother, moved to a cabin he owned before marriage, seeking to hunt and explore in peace. After a 10-hour train ride to Malta, he met his delighted, healthy 59-year-old grandfather. On the ride to the cabin, they conversed, and his grandfather shared plans to hunt, hike, and fish. The cabin, nestled in a grove of trees, looked welcoming. It was small but cozy, with red bricks, 4 windows, and a front porch with rocking chairs. The inside had 2 cozy rooms, a spacious kitchen, and a living room with a TV. He unpacked and stepped outside while his grandfather prepared venison and vegetables. He stayed up until midnight, watching a football game. As he prepared for bed, he heard a loud and long howl, like someone being torn limb from limb. His grandfather had mentioned wolves in the area, but he felt something was wrong, pushing it aside. The next day, his grandfather took him hunting for bighorn sheep in the hills, warning him to stay close due to wolves and other predators. Siberian tigers were likely further north. After a long day, his grandfather brought down a buck, but they didn't spot any bighorn sheep, which was strange. The next few days were filled with adventure, fishing for salmon, trekking through the woods, finally spotting bighorn sheep on a day without hunting gear. On his second to last night, all heck broke loose. Around 1 a.m., he woke to howling. "Darned wolves," he muttered, but realized this howl was different, deeper, directly from the animal's gut. If it was a wolf, it was huge. Wide awake, he cautiously stepped out of his room. His grandfather was fast asleep. He tiptoed into his room and took out his Remington 700. The animal sounded close, deafeningly loud. Wondered how his grandfather wasn't awake, regretting not waking him. As he fully stepped outside and carefully shut the door, he saw a full, bright moon illuminating the quiet area. He had a sudden urge to look left, sensing something watching. Poking out from behind a large birch tree, he saw a face like a wolf's, but 8 feet off the ground, with glowing yellow eyes. The head was pure white. He raised the gun, not needing the scope. It stepped out from the tree, solid white, 7 or 8 feet tall. It looked like a wolf, but wolves don't stand on 2 muscular legs. It had claws that could rip off your flesh easily. The creature opened its mouth and howled the same deep, guttural howl from the previous night. Terrified, he fired, not knowing if he hit it. He ran inside, slammed and locked the cabin door. His grandfather, obviously worried, asked in Russian what was wrong, seeing the gun and his terrified expression. "There's something outside," he whispered, leaning on the door to listen. Suddenly, loud scratching on the door, then a low growling from the opposite side. It sounded so low and I thought it was trying to talk. He was shaking. His grandfather's face was pale. He returned with an AR-15. "What's it doing here?" his grandfather asked himself. The scratching and growling stopped. Silence. Then, seconds later, the howl again, distant. "That thing, it has been here for as long as I can remember," his grandfather explained. "It's eaten sheep and deer and left there mutilated. Bodies near my house and by the tree line in the woods that never leaves me alone." "Grandpa, I think we need to leave," he said. They stayed awake, guarding the door. At sunrise, his grandfather told him to pack. He drove him to Malta and stayed until the train to Moscow came. He tried to persuade his grandfather to come, but he insisted the cabin was his home. In Moscow, his family was surprised by his early return. He explained complications but didn't elaborate. He believes the creature was a Siberian werewolf, a monster seen in the Siberian tundra. He talks to his grandfather occasionally, but each time he sounds more sad, weaker. A few days ago, his grandfather barely spoke above a whisper, saying he was under the weather. Russian Werewolf 756 fears the creature is getting the best of him, and wonders if his grandfather will survive another month there. He feels scared for his grandfather's life and wants to do whatever it takes to make that thing leave him alone. Mel 756, a 30-year-old mother of two, recounts a terrifying moment in Grand Portage, Minnesota, one of the most rural places in the state. With a population of about 722, it's on Lake Superior. With hunting and fishing areas and occasional northern lights in winter, she lives in a decently sized house at the edge of the woods, meters from the water, which serves as the family's swimming pool. Her family has lived there their whole lives and has no intention of moving. One fall day, around November, she decided to walk in the woods alone. It was around 6 p.m., and the sky was darkening. She didn't mind having walked there hundreds of times at dusk or night without incident. Her husband, who hunts and fishes there, taught her all the paths. She took the path leading to the deep woods, confident. She saw rabbits, squirrels, and a doe and fawn under the darkening sky. Further into the woods, all sounds stopped. No insects, no animal footsteps. She was confused, but remembered her husband saying it meant a predator was near. She knew the woods connected to Grand Portage State Park, so hundreds of animals were possible. Suddenly, an ear-piercing wail, a sound she'd never heard, unlike any animal in those woods, erupted, like rotting flesh and decaying fish, gagging. She heard soft footsteps to her left, saw nothing. The footsteps grew louder, and she turned to run, but tripped on bark. Then she heard something she'll never forget. Her 5-year-old son's voice calling from behind oak trees to her right. "Mommy? Mommy? Is that you? Come here, I found something cool." She wrinkled her face in confusion. Her son was in bed, not out here alone. The voice repeated, not changing tone or speed. It was his voice, but all wrong too, like a static recording. She panicked. She got up. The thing responsible for the voice stepped out from behind an oak tree.
Ouch.
It was about 6 feet tall, lanky. Its face was horrible. Deepest black eyes staring at her, no nose, but a huge mouth. Its pale gray and white skin showed protruding ribs. Its arms and legs were thin, but looked strong. Suddenly it smiled, chilling her as if 100 cold fronts were going over her body. It had jagged white teeth. Slowly, its mouth seemed to expand, becoming almost too big for its face. Then it spoke in her 7-year-old daughter's voice. "Mommy, it's cold. Let's go home." She screamed and bolted down the path towards the house, running with everything she had, hearing raspy breathing and rapid footsteps behind her. It released a series of ear-piercing wails and shrieks, but she didn't turn around. As she reached the clearing, the thing stopped. She no longer heard footsteps, but she didn't slow down, bolting up the porch steps, slamming and locking the door. Her husband, coming from the kitchen with oatmeal, was surprised, seeing the fear on her face as she pulled down all the shades. When she regained composure, she sat down and told him everything. To her surprise, he believed her, admitting he'd heard shrieks from deeper in the woods during some hunts. She researched, and the closest thing she found were a wendigo or a rake. She insists the story is true, that she knows what she saw and heard, and it wasn't a bear. She never goes out at night anymore, and even in broad daylight, carries one of her husband's hunting rifles just in case. Something in the woods of New Jersey. DM 51722. DM 51722 recounts a haunting incident from 3 years ago. He was 18, living in Chatsworth, New Jersey. Loved adventuring in the nearby forest, a 5-minute walk from his house, sometimes alone. This incident happened on a summer Saturday. He decided to go camping with 2 friends. A and C, they played video games and watched TV at his house. I made peanut butter and oatmeal, while DM 51722 and C had cold cuts and snacks. After 2 hours, they drove to the woods, joking. Entering the woods, they spotted snakes, deer, and a rabbit. They parked and started walking. After a full day, they were too tired to reach their planned campsite, so they set up where they were. Each had their own tent. DM 51722 set his tent in a small clearing by a creek, a 1-minute walk from A and C, so he wasn't worried. Before sleeping, they sat around a campfire, telling jokes and eating junk food. At 1 a.m., they finally went to bed. DM 51722 fell asleep around 1:30 a.m. He awoke to splashing and a twig snapping outside in the dark. Immediately creeped out, thinking it might be a black bear. He slowly worked up the nerve to look outside and saw a goat drinking from the creek. But something was weird about it. Black patches on its back that looked like skin. He thought it was hurt or deformed, but it acted calmly. Then, in a split moment, it looked directly at him and gave a crazy yelp. like a bat chittering and a goat bleating. Then it unfolded the black patches, revealing wings like bat wings, and began to fly. He screamed like a baby and ran to wake A and C. They were annoyed, saying, "Poor baby, did you have a nightmare?" But they saw his serious look and sobered up. He yelled that they needed to get out, promising to explain later. They ran towards the edge of the woods where his truck was. He was sobbing. I offered to drive, and he got in the back seat, screaming at him to speed up. I got in the passenger seat. He calmed down a little by the time they reached his house, and it demanded an explanation. He told them, insisted he was dreaming or crazy, but he knew what he saw. The next morning, he researched and is pretty sure he saw the Jersey Devil. He warns, just don't go adventuring in the Chatsworth Woods. SSS 123-24 recounts a trip to the Amazon rainforest in Brazil 4 years ago. 2 friends, G and F, thanks to F's wealthy parents. They were excited, just us 3 guys, planning to manage with guides. The flight from Alabama to Brazil was about 22 hours. They landed in Rio de Janeiro in the afternoon the next day, having slept most of the way. He took pictures as they descended. They collected their bags and found their taxi. The driver spoke no English, so they showed him a map to a remote village, where their guide, Francisco, waited. Francisco, about 30 with wavy brown hair and dark brown eyes, was serious and didn't tolerate nonsense. They shook his hand. Francisco spoke broken English but was understandable. He gradually opened up. He planned to take them deep into the rainforest, 2 lagoons, and the Amazon River, hoping to see big snakes and other bizarre animals. The village of Ugua was quiet, friendly. Francisco's family welcomed them, giving them spacious rooms. They had a delicious meal of beans, rice, and chicken, followed by sweets. The next morning, G woke him, and F. Francisco soon told them to get in the car. The 20-minute drive to the lagoon was full of rainforests. Insects and birds greeted them. The humidity was great, and they were excited, but Francisco calmed them. He warned them to pay close attention. They would spend 2 nights with the Guarani tribe, who were friendly, and he had already contacted them. SSS 123 replied, "Well, thank God they're friendly, but aren't there isolated, dangerous tribes here?" Francisco answered, "Whatever you do, stay close to the village if you decide to explore a bit. But you must stay close, and most importantly, when we're on the river, keep your head down low. Sometimes they may fire arrows at us, but don't worry. We're going to be fine." G and F laughed, joking about shrunken heads. Francisco's scowl deepened. "There's nothing funny. My own friend went too far away from the village and was never seen again. I know it was no animal because I took a small hunting party out there and we found arrowheads and blood where he'd been going." A chill went down SS's 123. He exchanged glances with G and F. This could be dangerous, but he was still excited. At the Guarani village, they were surprised by the natives' tattoos, nose rings, and masks. The leader, Gulan, awkwardly shook their hands while conversing with Francisco. They got into a boat and sped down the Amazon. The scenery was amazing. He saw a jaguar staring from trees and alligators swimming. A couple of minutes later, Francisco pointed and they nearly dropped their cameras. A massive anaconda, over 20 feet long and easily 200 pounds, gliding through the water. It slowly sank. Then, everything went downhill. Francisco began saying, "It can't be possible. We've seen only the dangerous animals." They weren't sure what he meant. It was the rainforest. There'd be plenty more animals. But Francisco seemed suddenly scared, terrified. He tried to turn the boat, but G and F weren't ready to leave. Francisco jumped at F, putting his hand over his mouth and hissing, "Hush, boy. These are signals of the wild. There's something dangerous here." SS's 123 believed him. F calmed down but was breathing heavily, still mad. SSS 123 wanted to head back. He then realized something. The rainforest around them went quiet. G and F noticed it too. Francisco was breathing heavily. Suddenly, from the rainforest, they heard the voice of the Guarani leader they had just met. But this was impossible. The tribe only had 1 boat, and they were 5 miles from the village. The voice spoke English. "Francisco, come here. We're to save, it's dangerous in the water." Their names were spoken after his. Couldn't be the same man, as the leader didn't speak English, but it was his voice, gruff and raspy, rolling his R's. The voice seemed to boom. Francisco desperately tried to turn the boat, but it was stuck. They were far from the village, with no radios or phone signal, and dangerous tribes could be out here. "Francisco, what's happening?" F asked. Francisco barely whispered, "It's the mapping." SS's 123 stammered, "Well, what is that?" He assumed something didn't want them there, dangerous like a Bigfoot. Francisco whispered, crouching lower, that the mapping guardie hated people in their territory, seeing them as outsiders, and would kill them. Apparently these mapping guardie could be up to 10 feet tall, and natives prayed to them. Suddenly, a large splash. They all turned. SSS 123 saw the most disturbing thing, an ugly, massive creature wading through the water. Similar to an American Bigfoot, but with only one large, menacing eye. Two large things, about 4 inches long, came from its mouth. Its arms were massive, capable of tearing someone in half. This horrifying thing came right for them, swimming towards the boat, screaming unnaturally. Kakuda, Karash is hurry. Gaka, Gakana, Kakana, this horrifying thing kind of unconquated. Conrecital, Corrent, so Corrented betters, Corrents betters, Corrents beddings, Parentsed, Corrented in lot. When it got within 10 feet, it sank. SSS 123 was certain he would die, crying and screaming. Then the boat roared to life, and they sped away at the last second. They turned and saw the creature screaming, emerging from the water. Back at the village, Francisco barely spoke, arranging a taxi. Everyone at the Guarani village seemed scared and quiet. Francisco shoved them into the car. They rode away, vowing never to return. They stayed in Rio de Janeiro for the rest of the trip. Back home, still shaken, they told their families the trip was incredible, though not entirely positive. The trip haunts them, and he warns anyone going to the rainforest in Brazil to be careful. Sammy Lynn, 16, active in rodeo and living in Nevada, recounts an experience from late winter. Her brother and a close friend, T, got permission from the local reservation to use their arena for roping practice. They arrived early, their horses usually even-tempered, but Sammy's mare, a bit of a glutton and prone to panic, was on edge, as were the other horses. They shrugged it off. After spending most of the day roping cattle, they decided to trail ride and explore nearby animal tracks by a river close to the arena. About 30 yards from the water, they smelled a rotting dead animal. Then, something in the tree line caught the horse's attention. Her mare flat out refused to go further. Tired and frustrated, they decided to leave the horses for the night and stay at T's, who lived closer. They prepared the horses for the night, fed and watered them, then headed to a family friend of T's for dinner. After food, laughs, and pool, the river encounter was out of their minds. Around 9 p.m., everyone wanted to sleep, but Sammy wanted to check on the horses one last time. T's family friend warned against going alone. T offered to drive her down. They piled into the truck. The half-mile drive was slow due to icy roads. Before crossing the bridge over the river, Sammy felt a dread hit me like a ton of bricks. She looked out the window at her glowing yellow eyes. She couldn't describe them, only that not enough light was hitting them to make them glow. Normally rational, her gut told her something was wrong. T then asked if she smelled that awful smell, which Sammy hadn't noticed until T mentioned it. When Sammy didn't respond, T looked at her and followed her gaze to the same yellow glare. Both were terrified, not knowing what the thing was. As it was at least 8 feet tall, no animal in those parts was that big. Sammy finally came to her senses and hit the gas. Their truck slid but caught traction, making their way back to the arena. When headlights hit the horses, Sammy noticed her mare hadn't touched her food, highly unusual for her. The other 2 horses hadn't eaten either. Scared and cold, they got back in the truck and drove back to T's without incident, arriving around 11 p.m. and immediately fell asleep. Sammy woke suddenly to her brother, shaking her arm. She asked what was wrong. He put his finger over his mouth and pointed to the window. She heard tapping and occasional scratching. It was 3 a.m. T and Sammy hadn't told him about the bridge encounter. Trying to be rational, she told him to ignore it, but was convinced it was the thing from the reservation, and it had followed them. Didn't know. At sunrise, she woke T and her brother to get the horses and go home, not wanting her mare out there with that thing any longer. She told T about the tapping and scratching. After coffee, they looked by her window for tracks. They found what appeared to be deer hooves, but the pattern was like the deer was injured, not normal, and only one pair. This worried her more about the horses. They were fine, but their food and water were still untouched. They loaded up and left as fast as they could. As they drove over the bridge one last time, Sammy looked into the tree line and saw a massive buck staring back at me. It was huge, looked rotten and dead, with skin falling off its bones and legs bent in weird directions. But the worst part was its face, containing the same yellow eyes they'd seen the night before. Sammy swears it smiled, revealing a sickening smile with yellow pointed teeth. She looked away, then glanced back, and it was gone. She thinks it wanted one last scare. She still has questions, but knows she's never going back there again. This concludes the episode with a reminder for listeners to share their scary experiences and support the show.